All right, so we're diving into animal embryo transfer technicians. And I have to say, when I first saw this topic, I don't know why, but I had this very sort of like clinical image in my head. Like someone in a lab coat just kind of like moving tiny little embryos between Petri dishes.
Yeah.
But from the research you sent over, it seems like there's a lot more to it.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So way more than that. We're talking high stakes, delicate procedures, even legal frameworks.
Okay, so it's not just about playing matchmaker for free friends then.
Yeah.
So let's break it down. What do
Yeah.
these technicians actually do on a daily basis?
So they're really like the surgeons of the animal breeding world, right? Except instead of scalpels, they're using these specialized tools. And actually, I'm dying to tell you about this one called a gun that they use. But yeah, they use these tools to transfer embryos. And it's very meticulous work, requiring a deep understanding of animal reproductive physiology. And they're not just assisting vets, they're actually making judgment calls,
Yeah.
making sure the animal's welfare is the top priority. And they have to do all this while working within this strict legal framework.
Hold on, a gun. Now you're making this delicate procedure thing sound a little bit intense, I'm not going to lie. But the legal framework thing, that's something you don't often think about when it comes to animal breeding. Why is that so crucial in this field?
Yeah, it's super important. These technicians aren't just like following a recipe or something. They're dealing with living creatures and impacting things like genetic diversity and sometimes even the survival of endangered species.
Yeah.
So they really need to be aware of all these national and international regulations surrounding embryo transfer. It's a huge responsibility.
Okay, so it's not just a love for animals then. It takes precision, a strong stomach and a legal mind all in one.
Exactly. And the ability to think on your feet. Because as you can imagine, working with live animals means things don't always go as planned.
Speaking of things not going as planned, let's talk about the not so glamorous side of the job. Because, every job has its ups and downs, right? So reading through this research you sent over there was this mention of the emotional toll that this job can take. And it really got me thinking, like, beyond the technical stuff, what kind of mental fortitude do you need to do this kind of work?
Yeah, that's not something people always consider.
Yeah.
You're right. It's not all about the science.
Yeah.
There's this inherent emotional connection you form when you're working with animals.
Yeah.
One of the papers you shared mentioned this technician who had a successful embryo transfer and birth, but then the calf didn't survive the first few weeks. And dealing with those kinds of situations, while still staying composed and professional, it takes a special kind of resilience.
Yeah, it's a lot heavier than you'd expect. And it's not just the emotional weight either, right? There's the physical demands of the job itself.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's more demanding than most people realize.
Yeah.
And honestly, a lot of it ties back to that gun we were talking about.
The embryo transfer gun.
Yeah. Maneuvering that thing, especially in tight spaces and sometimes with large animals.
Yeah.
It takes strength. And you're not just doing it once. It's repetitive motions, sometimes for hours.
Okay, I'm officially rethinking my whole fluffy bunny image of this career path. So not for the faint of heart then. On top of all that, didn't the research also mention something about exposure to different pharmaceuticals and stuff?
Oh, yeah, definitely. That's another thing to consider. These technicians are working with all sorts of pharmaceuticals and disinfectants during these procedures.
Yeah.
They need to be incredibly careful about safety protocols. Not just for themselves, but for the animals too.
Wow, it sounds like a lot to handle. So really, what kind of person thrives in this environment? What's that magic mix of skills and personality that you need to not just survive, but actually excel in this kind of role?
Okay, so let's say someone is listening to this and thinking, all right, I'm in. I've got the guts, the resilience, the love for animals. What's the actual path to becoming an animal embryo transfer technician? What do you need to do to get started?
Well, you got to start with a strong educational foundation.
Okay, so we're talking like animal handling 101 kind of thing.
Not exactly. It's a bit more in depth than that. The research you sent over actually highlighted degrees in veterinary science, animal science, even biology, as really good starting points.
Right, because you need to understand the why behind it all, not just how to handle the animals.
Exactly. You need to understand animal reproduction inside and out. And that's where that whole reproductive physiology thing comes in.
Okay.
Which, by the way, is like the study of how animals reproduce on a cellular level. Hormones, cycles, all that jazz. You got to have that solid groundwork to really excel. Makes sense. So you've aced your biology exams. You're basically fluent in animal anatomy. What's next? Do you jump right into a lab, or is it like years of interning with some embryo transfer guru?
It's kind of both, actually. Hands-on experience is key.
Yeah.
All those career guides you sent, they emphasized internships, big time. Whether it's a clinic, a research facility, even a breeding farm, that's where you really learn the practical side of things. troubleshooting on the fly.
Right, you learn by doing, I guess. And what about networking? Is that actually important in this line of work?
Oh, absolutely. More than you might think. This field is always changing. New tech, new procedures, even just sharing tips and tricks with other technicians. It's how you stay ahead of the game.
Okay.
Networking opens doors. You find mentors,
Yeah.
job opportunities, even get to collaborate on cutting-edge research. It's not always what you know, it's who you know.
That's true in so many fields.
Hmm.
So you've got the education, the experience, you're basically best buddies with every big name in embryo transfer. What's the career ladder look like? Is it just a straight shot to the top, or are there like levels of embryo transferring mastery?
Uh-huh. I love that you're thinking long-term. It's definitely not a one-size-fits-all path. You might start as an assistant learning the ropes from more senior technicians, and as you gain experience, you take on more complex procedures. Maybe even specialize in a particular species or technique.
Oh, wow. So you could become like the go-to person for embryo transfer in pandas, or like the leading expert in some crazy new freezing method.
Exactly. And down the line, you might even lead your own team, manage a lab train, the next generation of embryo transfer rock stars. There's a ton of potential.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Honestly, this whole deep dive has been eye-opening. It's incredible how much goes into this field. It's definitely a career that deserves a lot of respect, not just for the animals involved, but for the skill and dedication of the people who choose this path.
I couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
It takes a special kind of person to do this work.
Absolutely. Well, on that note, I think we'll wrap things up here. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us, and until next time, remember, folks, knowledge is power. So keep those brains engaged.
Thanks for having me.